It's true. Across the globe, women aren't as prosperous as men. Gender inequality is a pressing moral issue, but we forget it has massive economic implications. If you were to put all of the women who don't have access to formal financial services in one place, they would make up the third largest country in the world. That means an entire population without bank accounts, credit cards, or other tools you and I likely benefit from daily. Prosperity for women starts with inclusive policies, products, and people around the globe, and the investment to make it happen. Welcome to the Making Finance Work for Women podcast. My name is Sonja Kelly, and I lead Women's World Banking's proprietary research division. Join me as I speak with changemakers around the globe to deconstruct the social and economic exclusion women face. We'll discover new evidence together and drive action to accelerate women's economic empowerment. Because a leg up isn't a handout, it's a global game changer. Welcome, and thank you so much for tuning into the Making Finance Work for Women podcast, streaming on YouTube and available wherever you get your podcasts. If you are listening on YouTube, you'll be able to see us and you'll be able to find additional insights and resources linked in the description of the video. So even if you're listening on your own platform, I encourage you to head over to YouTube for that. I'm Sonja Kelly. I'm the global head of the Women's World Banking Institute, and I'm also the host of Making Finance Work for Women. Today's episode is a special one because we are recording this as a crossover conversation with Radically Yours. It's a platform that is telling the stories of women who are challenging norms and building businesses and changing what leadership looks like. Before we get started, I'd like to give a special shout out to the sponsor of the Making Finance Work for Women podcast, Ernst & Young LLP. EY is a global leader working across assurance, consulting, law, strategy, tax, and transactions. EY teams ask better questions to find new answers for the complex issues facing our world today. You can visit ey.com to explore their latest insights and services. Now, today, I'm delighted to be in conversation with Radhika Bajoria. She's the founding member of Radically Yours. Radhika works with women founders, with investors, with entrepreneurs, which we care about deeply, who are building large, ambitious businesses. At Women's World Banking, we are deeply obsessed with women entrepreneurs, deeply focused on them in our work. And we focus on the nano and micro, small and medium-sized businesses that power households and communities and economies around the world. So today we're going to explore what connects these worlds. What does a woman running a nano business have in common with a woman building a venture-backed company? Where do their challenges differ? What would it take for financial systems, investors, and business ecosystems to recognize women entrepreneurs, not as a niche segment, but as one of the greatest growth opportunities of our time? Hi, Radhika. I'm so glad that we're finally doing this.
Yeah, indeed. I've been in touch with y'all for about a year and a half, and finally this is happening. So excited to be talking to you, and you're yourself an inspiration to so many women, and you've been building this institute to create impact for women across the world. So kudos to you on that, and I'm so glad that we're chatting on this today.
Likewise. Well, I'm just so impressed with what you've built with Radically Yours and so glad to be in conversation with you. Is it okay if I ask you the first question? I know you're usually in the host seat.
Yeah, surely. Bring it on. I'm all yours.
All right. Well, Radhika, always in our episodes on the Making Finance Work for Women podcast, I always like to start with the human side of the work. And you spend so much of your time with women founders, with business leaders. Can you tell me what drew you into this space and like what you're hearing right now from women who are trying to build ambitious companies?
Yeah, I think at a very young age, I got exposed to this world of entrepreneurship. When I was in college, I was just about 18 and barely knew how to speak in English at that time because I grew up in a village in India. So
Wow.
everything that I would read in newspapers and articles, everyone was focused on a lot of male leadership content and male driven businesses. And I really failed to see a lot of role models around me for inspiration, because I was so confused about what should I do in my career and who should I look up to really, because the traditional news media only displayed a lot of women who had achieved something and were going to scale up further, but nobody talks about how someone really came from a small town like I had and really built up their dream step by step. So I always had this in mind, that how do I make sure that I have a brand of my own where I can connect with these people and they give me their time and attention to tell me their stories. Because, of course, nobody has the time in the world to talk to a college kid otherwise, to guide them, unless they are your family, friend, or a relative. And I had no background in business with my family that I could have some help from the people who I was surrounded by. So thankfully, because I used to write on LinkedIn, I grew up a following of over 200,000 people. And then it was so easy for me to approach people and ask them to give me time. But then I realized that instead of just having one on one conversations, why don't I create a platform where I can share these conversations with people like me who have this desire to learn from other women, like I had when I was young. And that's what happened. I created Radically Yours as a podcast platform and distributed it across, because I believe stories can change the world even if one person listens to an idea or an inspiration and gets that fire to start something of their own, or get that degree from their dream university that they've been wanting to do. I think the job is done. So I'm a big believer of narrative building and content plus community, the power that it can have to change the world. So that's what I've been building upon, and that's how Radically Yours also came into action. But I'm really also excited to learn about you, because you have been doing so much of work with the World Banking Institute for Women, and you have come across so many of such women leaders. Since you deal with small, medium enterprises, you might have seen them really rise up from nothing to something. So why don't you tell me about how you got into this, and what has your experience been in terms of seeing women leaders across the board?
Well, you said stories can change the world. That's so true. My mom's story actually changed my world and my trajectory. When I was growing up, my mom was an entrepreneur, and I remember like being really little and being at the pool. And my mom was sitting on the side of the pool with her business partner, and all of the kids were playing in the water. And she and her business partner were literally like drawing up the plans for their business. And my mom was a small business owner for my whole childhood. So when I got into the professional world and I discovered the power of credit to grow women-owned businesses, I was hooked. And so that really is like financial inclusion is really the space that I've been in for my entire career. But as I've been in that space, what I've noticed is that access to finance doesn't always mean empowerment. This is something that you probably see as well. Like it takes more than just finance, it takes more than just credit, it takes more than just access to a bank account for women entrepreneurs to thrive. They need access to resources. They need access to mentors. They need leadership skills. They need all of these things to thrive. And so that's what I try to focus on now is not necessarily the access to finance piece alone, although that is critically important, but also all of the other things that you just talked about, like access to other women's stories, access to skills, like being able to navigate government systems and forms and being able to market to their customers. Like there's so many things that come along with finance that make them successful. But I want to turn back to you actually, because one thing I've noticed in the global conversation is that we often talk about women entrepreneurs as one category, but that's not necessarily the case. Like a venture backed founder, which is like the population that you work with, that your listeners are, or your community members are, is a lot different than like a nano entrepreneur that is operating her business during her child's nap times. And so I wonder, like, as you're looking at that entrepreneurship landscape, what you see as the common threads between all of those different sizes of businesses.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very interesting question because, as you rightly said, I've interviewed people from across the boards in the world. Like, I've had the only female fund manager in Palestine who was helping, with the funding for tech startups across the world while she was sitting in Palestine. To someone who is on the board of Stanford Business School and is an Indian and was the first female managing director of Facebook, which is now Meta in India. And she's also one of the first females who's leading the investments for SoftBank in the South Asia realm. So it's so interesting that you asked me this because the founders in India that I've spoken to who have not even raised a substantial amount of money, who might have just raised about, $100,000. They say the same thing that these women who are helping at the top of multinational corporations like Meta, all of them have one common advice that choose your partner very wisely. And tell me that the only one attribute that they have developed within themselves is the ability to really spot the right people for their team. Because I believe so myself that even if you are very talented or skilled enough to launch a business, it will only reach a particular scale if you have the right people and the right brains to really take you forward in that journey. And what I've learned is this one really powerful line by these women that the brain count is always more important than the head count in any organization.
Uh,
And a
that's
lot of
so good. The
people
brain
just
count is more important than the head count. That's so good. Yeah.
exactly. And a lot of people just focus on filling up the office with a lot of hands to work along with. But how many of them are efficient enough? Just today, I was reading in the newspapers in the article that we have two retail stores in India which are fairly big. One is DMart and the other is Reliance Retail. Well, Reliance Retail has many, many more stores than DMart. In fact, it has 10x more stores than DMart, but DMart has more profitability than Reliance Retail, which itself shows that sometimes the quantity doesn't matter, but the quality of output that you are giving out really matters. And that's what I've learned from founders to investors to CEOs who are women across the board that, really you have to narrow down your focus on only one thing and get the right people to execute that one vision that you have to reach somewhere. And they've also told me this that because I'm a Gen Z, I ask for a lot of advice that they would like to give to young people. They say that people who those are young, they're not focused on one thing. They are wanting to do everything because of social media. They think that okay, let me try this, let me try that, and see which one will work out the best. And in that process, they end up doing nothing. So
Yeah.
I really
I
have
can
learned this by
identify.
myself also because I used to be like a jack of all trades and master of none for the longest time. But thankfully, through these kind of guidance that I get on my podcast and I share it publicly also, these women keep telling me that just focus on one thing and consistency over time compounds and really results into something. So believe in that power of consistency and don't really get attached to instant gratification, which unfortunately we are so used to now with social media that we want likes and attention at the blink of an eye. But what they've said is that just keep at it. Even when there are no results, even when there are days when you don't feel like showing up, you have to show up. If not for you, for your vision and for your team who has signed up for that vision. So I think all of these advice, it's like golden words for me, which I'm very happy to share through my podcast and now through the question that you asked me.
Yeah, and those are such important words for business owners of all sizes. And I think I don't know what your KPIs are, what your metrics are for success, but I did see a study in January this year that of what was it? It was like of newly started businesses or like of startups, half of them had at least one woman director or partner. So things are changing. Like women are not just a small proportion of leadership in startups. And yet there is still that global disappointing figure that women receive only 2% or less of venture capital funding. And that's a World Bank stat that like 98% of venture capital funding goes to men. And
Yeah.
so while we're seeing the market change in terms of like the number of startups that include women as a founder or a director or a partner, the finance like just isn't catching up. And that, I mean, that's true for businesses of any size.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And in fact, I've asked this pertinent question to all the global founders and VCs as well, that why is this the case? And the one common answer that I've gotten is that women sometimes are having this imposter syndrome where they
Mm,
believe that they can do more and nothing seems enough or
mm,
achievable so much that they can confidently pitch about it. Like, for example, even if a woman is making 100 crores in revenue, she'll be like, how do I get it to 500 crores? And then ask for some money further, versus a man who is just making about
mm.
10 crores. I think I should speak in dollars so that it's easier. If a man is just making $1 million in revenue, he will go like, he will go and say that, okay, my company is going to make $100 million in just about 5 years if you give me this investment, and this is the
Mm,
vision that I'm having. And the confidence just with that which they speak, I think it just like sells out in the market, because ultimately it's the human on the other side of the table who is evaluating you. It's not like a god who can predict the future a lot and really tell you what's
mm,
going to work out or not. So most of the VCs actually bet on the founders and their confidence levels. And I think in women, especially those who are
mhm,
the first time founders, they do not have that ability to project at a very higher scale if they've not achieved it yet. Like, for example, they only like to speak in the present
mhm,
moment. They don't like to commit too much of the future which is not happened. So yeah, I feel most of the VCs that I've spoken to, they have always said that a woman, if she has to rate herself in a business and talk about a business, she would always like give it 6 on 10 or maybe 7 on 10, and still believe that there's a lot of scope of improvement. Versus if they ask a male founder how much would they rate themselves and their business, they would be like 10 on 10 or sometimes even 11 on 10. And I think that sheer confidence sometimes gets VCs to bet on them, because they're like, okay, if the founder knows
mm,
that they're not going to give up and they are going to nail it even in the toughest times, I think our money is safe. Versus giving to women who actually trace profitability more rather than making losses, but they do not think of scaling up to an extent that a man does. A lot of VCs think, okay, even if we give X amount, we'll only get X plus one. We won't get X plus 10. So why not, give money to a
mm,
male founder instead? I think, but the dynamics are slowly and steadily changing when women are getting to learn the rules of the game even more. So I really feel
mm,
spiritually, because I read a lot of spiritual things also, that you have to play the game that you are in. You always cannot just be yourself,
mm.
if you have to get somewhere, because you're not the only one stakeholder in the game. There are so many people involved that are going to take you to the level that you want to get into. So I really think you have to put up that mask on sometimes to get people give you what you want, and not always just show your original self, because sometimes that can just harm yourself.
And now, a word from our sponsor. EY applauds Women's World Banking's 45-year legacy empowering women through financial inclusion. Together, we have a common vision to build a better financial services industry, one that is stronger, fairer, and more sustainable. Find out more on ey.com. Yeah. And this is so interesting that you're saying this, because it's not just women that face imposter syndrome. Actually, our leadership program for regulators, we had regulators in the room that were all the way up to deputy governor level a couple weeks ago in this training we do at Oxford University. And one of the women in the room said, like, oh, well, women face imposter syndrome. And like, that's something that we always need to overcome. And the men in the room actually said, it's not just women, it's us too. We also feel imposter syndrome and we just kind of fake it until
Yeah.
until we, and that was a bit of a revelation to me that like, it's not just women, it's also men too. And these messages that you're giving are great for women, but they're great for any founder that's trying to build something big. It also strikes me that everything you just said, and you were talking about like venture backed women founders, or businesses that have women partners or women directors. But you could have been talking about micro-sized businesses. Like you could have been talking about a sole proprietor. And the reason I say that is there's this $1.9 trillion credit gap for women around the world. That's the gap between how much money women, small, medium, and micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises need, and then what they actually receive. So there's a $1.9 trillion gender credit gap. And some of that is due to bias in lending. Some of that is due to the fact that women are less likely to have a credit score. Like there are structural reasons for this 1.9 trillion. But when we look closely at financial institutions, we also can see the data. Like we just did a study with an institution in South Africa. We looked at their data. And we found that systematically, women entrepreneurs are asking for less money. Like they're asking for the bare minimum they need instead of the maximum that they could absorb. And so it means women are getting less in credit, they're getting less in equity, they're getting less in funding overall across all business sizes because they're not asking for something big, and they're not. It's not only that they're not seeing themselves in that way, but they also are aware of the risks. This is this is part of the reason why women-owned businesses are likely to survive for longer than men-owned businesses are likely to shutter more quickly when they do fail, because women are not taking as big of risks financially. And so women-owned businesses are more steady. And therefore, to your point about the investors saying, like, oh, I want to invest in this man because he's more confident. Like maybe they should look at the research and show and see like women are actually more investable because it's a steady investment. Like it's not as big a risk to invest in women actually.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think a lot of VCs have become more focused now on seeing the data rather than just the confidence. And because after burning their fingers, of course, they've realized that fundraising is not about giving a nice TED talk and getting money. It's also about the numbers. But I also love the point that you
Yeah.
highlight that women sometimes don't really ask, they hesitate, and they feel like, why should we take help when we can do it ourselves in our slow and steady way? And maybe once that growth mindset
Mm.
changes from how they want to grow and lead, then the market will also respond that way. Sometimes the problem is always internal than external. And we keep saying that the VCs are not
Mm.
giving money to women founders, but what about women founders asking for it? I don't think so. There are enough and more who are asking for it as much as they should. And I'm glad that you highlighted that point, and I'm sure that you have done so many studies through your institute on the ground. So why don't you tell me some other more data also? I would love to know as to some research that you've carried on the ground with women entrepreneurs in the system, in the SME industry, that gave you an insight as to what really is happening in the world in real terms, as to what we see in the media, which sometimes is shadowed by the reality.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing I would emphasize that I see in the real world that doesn't get enough media attention is the growth story. Oftentimes we look at micro and even nano-sized businesses. By nano, I mean a woman who's kind of a part-time business owner. It's not even like her full day. And we think, oh, these are poor women who are entrepreneurs by necessity. And if they were in another context, they might choose a salaried job. And that is true of some women. And truly, there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the world who are entrepreneurs by necessity. But for many of them, actually, they have ambitions to grow, and they want to be able to expand their businesses. They want to be able to invest more. They want to be able to hire people. They want a world in which one day where their kid is sick, they can stay home and the business will continue to operate without them. And so for these businesses, like this is where more than a loan is really important. We did a study in Kenya working with Kenya Commercial Bank, KCB, and we looked at women business owners who just received finance. And then we looked at business owners who received finance plus other things. So this institution in Kenya had things like a CEO club where you could exchange ideas with other CEOs, both men and women. They had business training. They had access to mentorship opportunities. And these things didn't cost the financial institution a lot, but they made a huge difference in terms of the growth potential of the business, which also meant increased profitability for KCB. Like if businesses grow, the bank gets to grow along with them and offer larger and larger loans and have more capital as a result when the businesses store their capital at the institution. So I think that growth story is one that we kind of lose when we look at those nano and micro-sized businesses. And unlocking that growth is a bit of an obsession of mine, thinking about how to empower women-owned businesses with the tools they need to be able to grow from a nano, micro-sized business to a smaller, medium-sized enterprise. So, Radhika, I feel like we could talk for hours. We've covered a lot of things, and I have a lot of great notes from our conversation. I would love to end by hearing like what gives you hope. What gives you hope about the next generation of women-led businesses that you're seeing?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, which is close to my heart. Especially in India right now at this time, we are having so many young women protest for what they want. Like we just have
Mm,
a very brave girl. Her name is Ria Ahir. The police was apparently taking students into the police van for taking them to the station because they were fighting on the road for a protest, for a cause. And she stood right in front of the van, stopping it, trying to showcase that you cannot do this kind of injustice in a democratic country like India. You have to
mm,
listen to what students are saying, and you cannot really take their freedom of speech by locking them up in a police van. She was the only one amongst thousands of people there who took up this step and led. And I think that just like a symbol of so much of courage and bravery shown through her action, and this is just like one part which like blew all over the internet and encouraged so many more women to speak up for the injustice that was being done in that moment. But apart from that, talking about women founders in specific, I do see so many young women right in college or even in schools that are coming up with their new consumer brands like skincare,
mm,
food and beverage, or even toys for that matter. And some women who come from a privileged background of their families in businesses, they are leading their businesses right from the tender age of 16 or 17 and trying to learn how to lead it when they reach 25 or 26. So it's quite a change now to see that how women are not just focused on the idea of
mm,
getting married by the time they're in their mid 20s, but they're focused on really building themselves up and building their name in this world when they enter their 20s. So that's a big change, at least for the Indian market, because our society was so much inclined towards getting women married and getting that badge of honor as a success. that everyone
Mm.
is focused on getting a good degree and looking good to get a good husband. But now people get good degrees to get good VCs on their, cap table and in their life rather than just getting good partners in their life. So yeah, that's quite a big change, and I'm excited with the way people are approaching their life. They're just like fearless. We spoke about this hesitation that sometimes women have to ask for help or ask for money. But in young women, I don't see that at all. They are out there speaking loudly and clearly about what they want and how they want it and what they're going to do about it. So I think that clarity is something which is speaking louder than any action. And I think that's attracting global funds and global talent to the kind of businesses that women are building in today's world. So very excited to see that. But I would also want
Mm.
to hear the same from you as to what are you seeing in young women nowadays, and what change do you expect?
Mm. Yeah, I think there's one thing we didn't talk a lot about today, although you touched on it at the beginning, which is leadership. I am seeing um, the the instinct, the hunger, the propensity among young women to lead, and that is an essential skill that women need in order to grow their businesses. Like the skills that you need as a founder, kind of the know-how and like knowing your audience, knowing your product, knowing how to sell. That's a lot different than the skills you need to run a business with where like you're managing many people, you're motivating people, they're doing the work, they have the expertise. And I'm seeing among young women that drive to be leaders and of even at the beginning. Like it's not something where all of leadership has to be taught. It's something that they're learning. And that's something that your platform really does quite well is empowers young women and a lot of women, but especially young women with that awareness that they are leaders already, and these are skills that will move with them. And so that's something that I'm really watching, and I'm so hopeful about for the future. Well, yeah. This has been such a rich conversation. Again, I'm so glad that we did this. Thank you for thanks for suggesting this. Also, I don't or maybe I don't know who suggested this, but this was so wonderful. Thank you.
I know, it's been such a pleasure discussing this, and I feel a lot of thoughts run into your mind the more you question it, and then the more you have someone on an equal level to discuss it, who has seen things on ground. And talking to you was also so much of a realization as to how the ground realities are looking like in the world,
Mm.
not just in a specific part of the world. So yeah, I think the audience, I think, will love so much of our content after they watch, because they will get like a first hand view of how things are working out for women out there.
Yeah. We should close by letting our respective listeners know where to find us. So, how can they find the Radically Yours platform?
So they can find us on YouTube, Instagram, or Spotify. We are also there on Apple and Google Podcasts. If they can just type the name Radically Yours, and they will have the access to so many of our content libraries, which we've shot with women across the world in industries that you didn't even know existed before. So I feel it's quite a good watch. But with that, they should also watch our episode that we are recording right now, so that they can get more understanding of the work that both you and I are doing.
Totally. And if you want to learn more about Women's World Banking, you can find us at womensworldbanking.org. And we encourage you to follow both platforms. Thank you so much, Radhika.
Thank you.
So for our listeners at Women's World Banking, I'm so grateful for this conversation with Radhika. I always like to share my notes, and so here are my notes. Like I'm taking away the observation that women entrepreneurs are not waiting for permission to build. They are already building at every scale. And the question is whether financial institutions and investors and even like ecosystem builders and policymakers are going to keep up. So we're talking about women running a neighborhood business and founders building a high growth company. And there are all of these lessons that we can take looking across those. So if you like this episode, please make sure to leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform or a review. I read every single one, and it informs what we do next. So go ahead and head over there to your favorite podcast platform and leave me a note. And I look forward to seeing you next time on the Making Finance Work for Women podcast. Cheers.